All right. Good evening, everybody. Welcome to class number 3 for marketing. We're talking about consumer behavior, part 1. So I don't know about where you guys are. It's pretty rainy, pretty awful where I am. But I think that makes it a nice night to just chill inside and learn about some marketing. So hopefully your guys' internet holds up, not no disruptions there. Let's get going. So today, well, before I get into anything, term project, one thing you guys might have noticed, I posted this morning your groups for your group project. So that's all on Quirkus, so you can check that out. If you gave me a group, you should have the group that you belong to. And if you, I haven't seen Money Heist. I should watch that. Yeah, so if you have chosen a group, you should be in the group you belong to. If you didn't choose a group, or if your group wasn't the minimum size, then you were assigned some group mates. And you'll have a chance to interact with them later today in class. Today, well, let me just finish up with this first. The 2-page proposal is going to be due October 8th. Remember, there's 2 paragraphs involved in your group project proposal. What is the product? Who is your target market? I posted an example of a proposal that got 5 out of 5. They're going to be scored out of 5. If you have a 3 or a 4 out of 5, that's okay. Like, you'll have a chance to talk with me after fall break to kind of get feedback and improve your project going forward. Okay, so Shakira asks, are the groups changeable? Message me during the break. Yeah. Okay, so today we'll start off with the survey results. And we'll talk about that a bit. And then we will get into market research, kind of how we conduct or set up kind of a marketing research agenda. Then we'll probably break somewhere around there after we've done with market research, then go into consumer behavior and a little bit at the end on business behavior. And when we say consumer behavior, what we're going to articulate today is a theory of a rational consumer, where they kind of proceed through a multi-step process whenever they're confronted with, say, like a buying opportunity. Okay. Next lecture, we'll be talking about a more psychologically motivated consumer who kind of behaves maybe not completely rationally, but who can be influenced by things which, by levers in kind of the marketing toolkit. All right, so survey results. What did I ask? I asked, how should the Apple Watch be classified in the Boston Consulting Group growth share matrix, right? And I asked you to check the lecture 2 slides for how to compute the market share and the growth rate. So we had responses in every category. Star was definitely the most popular. So let's start things off. I'm going to ask one of the individuals who selected dog. Let me find one of them. Let's see. Okay, is Vanessa here?
Hi, yeah, I am.
Hi, can you walk us through your categorization, why you chose dog for the Apple Watch?
Yeah, so I was going to pull up what I actually said on the survey, but I see that we're not allowed to see what we answered anymore.
Oh, well, I will change that for next week.
Okay, so basically just looking at the notes from last week, what I was saying from the growth share matrix is that they are low in both categories just because they have low profit margin relative to like the MacBooks and iPads and basically any other product that Apple offers. It's a lower product margin. And then I said low share of the market because there's a lot of other smartwatches out there that actually outcompete the Apple Watch, such as Garmin, as well as Samsung, I believe, is higher in terms of like what it does for a smartwatch. So that's just a little bit of like why I thought it was a dog.
Okay, yeah, so that's super interesting. So there's kind of 2 dimensions maybe to your answer. One is Apple Watch relative to other Apple products, and then one is Apple Watch relative to kind of other wearable devices, and kind of on both counts, you think it's kind of underperforming.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, cool. So yeah, thanks, Vanessa. That's a great answer. It kind of gives a little preview of what are the different ways we can calculate sort of the share when we're thinking about classifying our product, right? So yeah, so Vanessa's research kind of showed that in the wearables market, Apple Watch was underperforming. So let's go to someone who chose Star, because I imagine someone who chose Star kind of found different information. So let's see. Is Robert here?
Yep, I'm here.
All right. So why Star?
So I looked into the Apple Watch market share overall, and I found in 2019 Apple owned 34% of the market share. The closest competitors was Samsung and Huawei, which was at 9%. And then in 2020, it grew by another 6%, which is a huge leap, bringing up to 40% market share, very much dominating the market. As well as its overall sales, I believe, if I can recall, I can't quite see where my answer is anymore, but I believe its sales grew by close to like 16% over the year. So they're clearly growing as well in like large sales and everything like that. So, the sales and the market share growth is both there over the year.
Fantastic. Okay, so calculated the market share, calculated the growth rate. So from the source you found, did they say what the market share is relative to? It sounds like other wearables.
Yeah, it's other smart wearables. So they got the Samsung, the Garmin, the Fitbit, the Huawei.
Okay.
They call BBK, and then they have an others section for ones that are just too small to be.
Do you feel like that's kind of the right measure for sort of like the total potential of the market? That like all of the wearables revenue added together gives you kind of like the size of this market?
I believe so, because it fills in its own little niche of like, kind of like a augmented exercise type wearables for like health,
Okay.
So yeah, it fills a different gap than any other like Apple product, like a Mac or a phone or something like that.
Nice. Okay. Yeah, great answer. Great research. Thanks, Robert. So let me see. Yeah, Shoaib, you have your hand up. Do you want to add something to the STAR classification?
Yeah, so kind of just building on Robert's point, the research that I saw was like it broke down global market shares of smartwatches, which I thought was like a good measure to look at. And it broke it down by quarter. And for like the past 6 years, the lowest quarter market share that Apple had was 44%. So just based off of that, it kind of shows that they are pretty dominant in this space. And this is specifically looking at the smartwatch space globally. So not
okay, so
wearables in general.
Yeah, so okay, so the smartwatch space, not necessarily just wearables. Actually, maybe I'll ask you a little follow on. So given that you think kind of the Apple Watch is a star in the wearables space, what do you think kind of should be done by Apple? Kind of keeping in mind sort of things we talked about last class, like should they sort of hold, just keep steady with what they're doing? Should they do something to change like the price or the quality?
Well, just like off of like quick research, I know Apple Watches generally are priced at a premium compared to other smartwatches. Mm-hmm. So I think they should kind of hold where they are because they have a high relative market share and the overall space is growing. So
okay, yeah. So it's kind of, it's not broken, whatever they're doing. So there's not really much change.
But I guess like based off of what we learned last lecture, they should be investing more into this.
Maybe investing more into it. Okay, yeah. Let's see, Angelica, you have your hand up.
Yeah, I did notice something pretty cool that, I mean, not really cool, but something different that Apple did, I would say in the past few years with the Apple Watch. It seems like now they have just so many more choices and things you can customize the Apple Watch with, and it'll be interesting to see how that plays out over the next couple of years, whether that'll help increase their share of the market, because there are more competitors now after all compared to prior.
Okay, so you're kind of, Apple's been expanding their product line with this Apple Watch, like different varieties, and that's potentially been contributing or will help kind of keep the growth going. Yeah,
Yeah, I
okay,
think they
cool.
partnered up with like different brands like Hermes, I think, just for the band. And they have
That's
different
very
bands for
interesting.
different like lifestyles.
And Nike, I see in the chat. That's very interesting. So we'll come back to that. That's a great point. All right, so let's do cash cow next. So let me ask, is Ahmed Mosen here? Is Ahmed here?
Yeah, I'm here. Can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you.
So the reason why I chose cash cow is because from what I found is that the smartwatch market is saturated at this point. So those who want an Apple Watch most likely have one, and it's only compatible within the Apple ecosystem. So it's relatively slow market growth in that area, and it's also very expensive as well. So it is a slow market growth. And also what I've also found was that it also has a higher market share within North America, over 50%. So because the iPhone is already popular, people already associate their watch to work very well with their phone as well. So that's one reason why Apple Watch is quite popular in North America.
Yeah, so let me follow up on that. And Abdullah's kind of written this as well, Apple ecosystem. So it sounds like when you're thinking about this position of the Apple Watch as a cash cow, that it's kind of saturated the market, can't really grow much more. You're kind of taking the position that maybe the potential market for Apple Watches are Apple customers, right? People who already have a laptop or an iPhone or a HomePod or some Apple product. And those are the people who are going to buy an Apple Watch. And those people have already been tapped out. Is that kind of a fair interpretation of what you're saying?
Yeah, that's what I'm saying.
Yeah, okay. So that's really interesting. So I think that's similar to what Vanessa mentioned, that we're thinking about two different definitions of the market potential, right? One is Apple customers, one is wearables customers, right? Two very different groups of people, giving us kind of two very different perceptions of like the growth rate or the potential growth rate going forward, depending on which one we use, right? So the question is like, which one makes more sense? I can't answer that. Let's go to, let's see. Yeah, Shakir, you have your hand up.
Yeah, I was going to expand on the first person who responded. I had the same data. It was basically about how Apple basically dominated the smartwatch market. It had a higher market share than any of its competitor. But I found that its growth was pretty stable. So then the market share did not go up or down all that much. It stayed pretty consistent. So that's why I basically chose that Apple Watch should be classified as a cash cow, because it didn't change, but it had pretty solid grip on the market.
Okay, so kind of some corroborating research. Thanks, Shakir. So I see some other hands up, but I'm gonna keep going in the interest of time to kind of finish things off with the question mark. So let's see, Alexandra.
I put the question mark because I just thought that it had a high market growth rate, and then a low relative market share, because I was comparing it internally with just Apple products for the market share, and in comparison to like their iPhones and their MacBooks, it doesn't seem like customers, whether they're Apple customers or not, they're not going to upgrade it each time a new series comes out. It's not like the iPhone where when an iPhone drops, they want to get a new one and upgrade and keep upgrading it, especially because there are so many phone companies where the upgrade is kind of built into your contract. So they always want to upgrade, or a new MacBook, they upgrade it for you. But with Apple Watches, once you already have one, the new one does pretty much the same thing. So there's no need to keep upgrading your watch once you have one, But I feel like it's a high market growth rate because they've been gaining popularity. And before it was like Fitbits were really, really popular. And then now the Apple Watch can do almost exactly what a Fitbit does, but then also do like text calls, sync to all your Apple, your whole Apple ecosystem, as someone else was saying. And it's just really convenient. So I feel like they have a lot of room to invest in that and probably make it so that people continue to upgrade it as they do with like the phones and stuff. But there's just a lot of room for growth.
A lot of room for growth. Okay, awesome.
Yeah.
So yeah, the feeling is that yeah, like the Apple Watch's capabilities are at par or better than all of their competitors. So kind of they should be growing fairly quickly into this market because, you know, it's Apple, right? Like it's a high quality product. Okay, cool. So I think that this is a really good discussion. Unfortunately, I think I've got to cut it off here to kind of have time for the rest of the lecture, but you guys can keep it going in chat if you like. But in general, so this idea of how should we define the market is super important. You know, you could go as broad as anyone wearing a watch, right? You could go as narrow as like only, you know, smartwatches, or you could go up to wearables. And then we saw this very interesting alternative where it's like only Apple customers would be willing to buy an Apple Watch, right? That's the size of the market, right? That's kind of under the assumption that if you're not an Apple customer, this product really isn't for you. And they're kind of not going to be marketing to those people. And it's not that share that matters, right? So I think that, you know, how you define that really will give you different results for what decisions you should be making with this product. Like, have you saturated the Apple user market, or are you just kind of just beginning to take a big bite out of the general wearables market, right? Cool. So great discussion. Let's kind of move on to our first topic of this lecture, which is basic market research. Okay. So here's our kind of marketing process diagram again. And now we kind of know what's the origin of customer needs and wants. But kind of what comes next. Next, we want to know, is there demand for our products? And what's demand? How is it different from needs and wants? So it's wants that are backed by buying power, right? So remember, a need is kind of a lack, right? You're lacking something, some physical or social or kind of psychological necessity. A want is the need framed by culture and context, and it's for a specific product that will help alleviate that lack. And demand is, well, I want that product and I can actually buy it, right? So I have the income to purchase it. So, you know, the question is there demand for our product? Can we develop a product or can we kind of choose our marketing tactics in a way that will satisfy our kind of target market, okay? So market research, we're collecting and analyzing information to guide current marketing decisions. We saw last class one type of market research, which was the SWOT analysis. Today, we're kind of talking about a different process, one that involves sort of collecting data and doing an analysis, maybe with kind of numeric data, right? So in general, how do we think about our marketing process for market research? First, we want to set research objectives. Second, develop a research plan, right? So 3, then we want to collect data in line with our research plan. 4, we'll interpret and report the findings. Okay, so we'll kind of describe each one of these as we go along. So when we do research, the purpose of it is to kind of inform our marketing strategy. For instance, you know, what needs should our product or should our marketing tactics be addressing? Which consumers should I serve? How should I position my company compared to my competitors? Or it can affect your choice of tactics, right? Should I change my price? Should I alter my product, sell it in a different location, or, you know, make it available through a different channel, which is another way of saying a different location? Or should I promote it differently, right? Research should change something that you're doing, or it should kind of validate what you're currently doing, right? So our first step is to set research objectives, right? So there's a few different kinds of research objectives. Exploratory is if we're just gathering preliminary information to define the problem. Descriptive is if we want to sort of describe, say, market potential, customer attitudes. Basically, if we want to just describe what do our customers look like, or what do our customers value in our product, or things like that, right? And the last type of research objective is a causal research objective, where we want to test some kind of hypothesis about a cause and effect relationship. When do we need to come up with a research objective, right? Same time as we need to kind of conduct our SWOT analysis. Something's changed, right? New event, new technology, new competitor has entered, new regulation has come in, right? And we kind of need to figure out what to do next. There could also be a need to basically test your pre-existing beliefs, right? What I think is important to customers actually important, right? Is what I think they value about my product actually what they value, okay? So we'll kind of look through a few different sort of prompts and think about what kind of research questions they might motivate, and how answering those research questions will direct our marketing strategy or our tactics, okay? So for instance, suppose you work for Lego, which is a toy company that kind of makes the little bricks that you put together. And you're the Lego marketing manager. And suppose you have this thought, maybe it's motivated by something someone said to you. You think, I don't know if Lego is popular with girls, right? I think that maybe Lego, mostly young boys play with it, and it's not that popular with girls, right? So that's kind of your initial thought. And then what do you do with that in terms of a research question? One thing you could do is just directly try to answer, like, is that true or is that not true, right? What are Lego user demographics? Okay. And when we think about classifying this research question, what do you guys think this would be? Sort of an exploratory, where we're trying to define, like, what are we even trying to know? Descriptive, where we're trying to describe something about our market or about our consumers, or causal, where we want to know what's the effect of changing something on, an outcome that we care about. Yeah, so I would say this is a descriptive one, right? We want to describe our target market, right? Or not our target market, but our current market, who uses the product, okay? So here's another one. Let's say you're an independent app developer, right? So you're creating an app and you have the thought, okay, like machine learning tools are pretty good at predicting things. I can actually use these statistical tools to predict new trending hashtags. That's an interesting thought, right? To be able to get ahead of the curve on what's going to be a big hashtag, what's going to be retweeted, or hashtagged on TikTok or Instagram before the trend kind of peaks, right? So get ahead of the curve. What kind of research question would this motivate, right? Maybe this is something interesting, right? But what do you do with this? What's a question that you might be able to ask? Angelica says, how effective is it, right? Is it a good tool? Great. So that would be basically kind of an exploratory question, I think, in the sense that, we want to know, is this something that's maybe viable to sell to someone, right? Is this kind of a good tool? Would this be a good product or not, right? So that's one question for sure. One question when you kind of think about a new product is, does anyone care, right? Are there companies that are interested in knowing what's a trending hashtag? Maybe there are. You can think of companies that might be interested in order to advertise more effectively. But we don't know. So that's one possible research question, right? What companies are interested in the hashtag trends? So I see some people are saying this maybe is a causal research, causal objective type. Does everyone agree? Maybe exploratory. Yeah, so you're trying to get information about, would anyone be interested in this, right? Another way of saying that is, who's my potential target market, right? Who would be interested in an app that can predict trending hashtags? So I think that, this is why exploratory and descriptive are often lumped together. I put this as descriptive. I think this could easily be framed as exploratory as well. In general, trying to describe who is my target market, what do they look like, who would value my product. I would kind of call that a descriptive research question. Yeah, Mohammed.
So professor, what's the difference between descriptive and explorative? I kind of get you know what I mean?
Yeah, in general, there's not a huge difference. Exploratory questions though are ones where you kind of don't even know what to ask. And you're just trying to kind of get a sense of what would be an interesting kind of area to explore. Whereas descriptive, you kind of have maybe a product in mind or a target market in mind, and you're trying to kind of describe some feature. But in general, it's a little fuzzy.
Like for instance,
yeah, go ahead.
Like for instance, if you just take this initial thought that machine learning tools can be used to predict new trending hashtags, so I could possibly ask a question that, is it worth the resources of my company? Is it worth my time? Like when it comes to the productivity that could, the incentive that it could give me. So in that case, that could be a explorative objective, right?
I think, yes, that would be exploratory. I think there's underlying questions there though. So is it worth it is ultimately a statement about revenues versus costs, right? And when you're thinking revenues, you're thinking who's going to buy and what would they pay. Costs, you kind of have a sense, right? Like how much time do I need to have my engineers spend on this? But then revenues, yeah. But I agree, like that's framing is definitely more exploratory. Yeah. I think so. In this course, yeah, I'm not going to make too strong a distinction between descriptive and exploratory. I'm never going to ask you to finally differentiate between them because I think it can be quite hard. So if unknown would be classified as exploratory, how do we define the unknown? Yeah, that's a good question. So there's a framing of this where it's like there are known unknowns, right? Like there's things that I'm not sure about, like, who are my demographics for buying Lego, or, which companies care about trending hashtags. But I kind of know that I don't know those things. And then there's unknown unknowns, right? Where I don't even know what's important to these companies. Like putting aside whether they like trending hashtags or not, like I don't even know kind of how they're operating or what's important to them. So there's that framing where like an unknown unknown would be motivating an exploratory question. Yeah. Okay. All right. So let's, Alexandra, hand up.
I was just wondering, for the first example, if you're the Lego marketing manager, I know you said that there's no hard or fast rule with descriptive or exploratory, but if I said the possible research question was, how do we make Lego popular with girls? Would that be more exploratory?
That sounds exploratory to me.
Okay, I just wanted to clarify that. Thank you.
Yeah. So you're kind of like, yeah, I'm not really sure kind of what is valued, or maybe valued by the demographic, or I'm not even sure what changes I would even be thinking about making to the product, if any. So exploratory feels like it's covering all the bases there. So coffee shop owner, the minimum wage is going up. So that's something that a lot of small business owners faced. She says, are customers willing to pay more? Great research question, right? My costs go up, I probably need to raise my prices. If I do, will I lose customers and how many, right? Kuya says legal loopholes to underpay employees. Okay, that's a potential research question. We'll focus on some less shady ones. What effects does it have on the company's success? Should I cut employees? Are employees worth it, right? Okay, so yeah, if my cost of employees go up, can I get away with having fewer, right? Should we divest? Should I just leave the market entirely, right? Cost saving measures, perfect. Can I switch to, like self-service kiosks instead of having baristas, right? So here's one possibility. How would customers respond if I raise prices? I think this was one of the early ones. What kind of objective type would this be? Yeah, so this one is causal. So how do we know this is causal? Causal questions, does changing one thing affect an outcome? There's typically going to be language that looks very similar across causal questions. Does Y change if I change X? Do consumers change how much they buy if I raise prices, right? So it'll often be like, how does one thing respond to another? What is the effect of one thing on another? Things like that. Yeah, it's structured like a hypothesis. Russ says, but doesn't it seem like Y is univariate in this example? So Y is a single variable, right? Price, or let's say Y is quantity, right? How does quantity change when I raise the price? So when I'm kind of thinking about an experiment, I'm thinking, okay, if, all I did for one group of consumers is I raised the price for them, but for another group, I left the price the same, would the group with the higher price suddenly be buying less, right? So I'm kind of thinking about, if I raise price, what's the effect on consumers, right? Yeah, testing the effect of changing something. Perfect. So this would definitely be a causal question. And then last, so if maybe you're a movie studio executive, you see COVID-19 has really affected box office sales, right? In a major way when theaters were completely shut, but still, even now that theaters are open, people are not going to the movies as much, right? So this is, for a movie studio executive, maybe life or death, right? Yeah, so if I sell movies to Netflix instead of releasing them in the box office, how would that affect something, right? The kind of movies I could make, my revenue, right? So should I sell movies to Netflix? Maybe that's a possible research question. How do I drop my costs, right? So I can still make my money even if I'm getting lower box office sales, right? So will people come back to movie theaters, right? Once everyone is vaccinated who wants to get vaccinated and everyone, has their vaccine passport, will people come back as much as they did, right? That's one possibility. And so this one would be kind of exploratory, I think, right? Will they come back? Yeah. Surely for 007, maybe. Yeah, if sure people would have come back quicker if, there was some huge movie event that everyone was looking forward to, like, the final Marvel movie or something. But we're kind of lacking on these big blockbusters right now. Okay, so once you have your question, you can develop a research plan. Your research objective will imply specific information needs, right? And the research plan will outline what those needs are. So if we think about the question, will people return to movie theaters eventually? Our research plan should tell us what information do we gather to answer this question, right? So if I'm running a survey, like, what should I be asking, right? Or if I'm not running a survey, sort of what other information should I be getting, right? So when you're thinking about gathering data, try to have like sort of a belief in the background to structure your thinking, right? and try to sort of partition maybe groups of people or groups of products, right? So when I talk about sort of having a belief in the background, you know, what I mean by that is saying like having a kind of a hypothesis, even if it's not a causal question, just being like, yeah, you know, I think that people will never feel as safe in theaters as they used to, right? I think they'll never feel as safe. And so when I structure my survey, basically I want to answer that question, like, you know, will they feel as safe or will they not, right? Or is there something I can do, something theaters should be doing to kind of make them feel safer? Or, you know, I think that people would come back for a blockbuster as long as it's not also on streaming, right? So, you know, that's kind of a thought that you have. Is it true or is it not? And sort of how do you sort of run your survey to answer that? Do theaters charge for customer stats or do they volunteer that info? It's a good question. As far as I know, theaters don't collect customer stats unless you're kind of a member, right? So if you're like a member, a scene member through like Scotiabank or just a member like at the theater, like you have an account on their online page or their app, they don't really know anything about you, right? But the sales, yeah. So the sales, I think they're contractually obligated to report to the studio so that they can divide up the money. And then in terms of volunteering that info, there's industrial kind of associations like that collect that information so that competitors can kind of know what their competitors are doing. So collecting data, primary sources. Primary sources are sources where you collect the data in response to the research question for current marketing decisions, right? So I have a decision to make, or I have a question to answer, right? Will people come back to theaters? Then I'm going to gather data to answer that question. That's a primary source. Versus a secondary source, which is data that's initially collected for other reasons, right? Government, you know, commercial, academic. Secondary sources are far, far more numerous than primary sources. So when we think about, when we think about a primary source, you might be able to answer your question more directly, but secondary sources, the data is already there. So primary can be expensive and secondary can be fairly cheap, right? For instance, primary, we think about going out to survey people, will you ever go back to theaters? Secondary, you can buy data from a cell phone location tracking company like SafeGraph, who, you know, track hundreds of millions of cell phones. And you can see, are people going to theaters or not? And, you know, are they, what kind of theaters are they going to? And so you kind of have that secondary source. It's not maybe quite what you need, but maybe it is, and there's a lot of it and it's a lot cheaper. Okay, so putting that aside, primary and secondary, they can either gather revealed preferences or stated preferences. So what's the difference there? Revealed preferences are the idea that what people do or buy shows us what they prefer. Okay, so people's actions reveal their preferences. Stated preferences, that kind of information is basically saying what people say they like shows us what they like, right? So when you run a survey and you say something like, you ask something like, do you feel safe in theaters? And someone says no, that's a stated preference, right? They're saying, I don't feel safe, right? They're saying that they don't prefer being in the theater. A revealed preference would be looking at that person's cell phone tracking data and seeing that they don't actually go to theaters anymore, that ever since the first lockdown, they haven't been to a single theater, that what they do is showing us what they like, right? Stated preferences are easy to get, and you get them through surveys. revealed preferences can be a bit harder, but they do come from secondary sources, which are cheap. So there's trade-offs here. So when you do primary data collection, maybe you're running a survey. There's inexpensive ways to do that, right? You could do a poll on a popular website like Reddit, on a popular app like Instagram. You can do forum posts. You can do live polling, just talking to people you know. I don't know if TikTok has a polling feature. Maybe someone who knows can write in chat, but you can kind of do very cheap things. Yes, it does. Okay, perfect, right? These kinds of inexpensive survey methods are what's called convenience samples or judgment samples. Convenience samples for obvious reason. You're just getting people where it's really easy to get them, right? These are very accessible to you. All of your Instagram friends or all of your Instagram followers can poll them very easily, right? Are they representative of the population at large? You know, do they represent kind of a good sort of maybe cross-section of all the people out there? No. But maybe they're the most relevant sample for you, right? Right. More expensive, we actually have companies that maintain sort of cohorts of people who are willing to respond to surveys if you pay them. Right? And for these companies, you can ask them to construct whatever kind of sample you like. You could say, I want a sample that's a good cross-section of everyone in Canada. Or I want a sample that's, you know, a cross-section of 18 to 35-year-olds in the GTA, okay? Once you pay for that sample, you can then ask whatever questions, and typically you'll pay by the question. You can also collect revealed preference data by observation, right? So unless you have a lab where you can see what people do after you kind of like, you know, give them different stimuli, observation, revealed preference, you need to kind of be buying that from a secondary source, right? Like the aforementioned cell phone tracking companies, okay? So very briefly, when you want to collect data to answer a causal question, that's going to be experimental data. So what you're going to want to do is you're going to want to gather a sample of people, and you're going to want to randomly allocate people into two groups: a treatment group that receives some kind of new thing, new stimulus, and a control group that keeps the status quo, right? So let's make that clear with an example, right? So for our question of the coffee shop owner, they had a causal question, right? If I raise prices, will people stop buying coffee, right? How much coffee will they stop buying? So you can basically gather data to answer this question. Here we'll use stated preference data by kind of going to SurveyMonkey, buying a sample of 100 18 to 35-year-olds. And for 50 of them, we'll ask them, how many large coffees would you buy for $1.50? And for the other 50, we can ask how many large coffees you would buy for $1.80, right? And we can see the difference in the average number of coffees, right? The ones that are more expensive, they'll buy less coffee. That's kind of our effective price, right? So we've kind of run an experiment where we've gathered stated preference data, right? To gather revealed preference data, we would actually have to raise price, right? So when you're gathering experimental data, there's a lot of kind of not so good ways to do it, right? So you can the temptation to use observations, to use revealed preference information is strong because it gives a better sense of what people actually prefer, not just what they say they prefer. So what if we compared coffee consumption in a market with high prices, like in Yellowknife, to one that has relatively low prices, like Toronto? We say, okay, like we want to know the effect of price on how much people will buy, right? What's the problem here? Yeah, so Shakir says confounding variables are the issue. Shukri says we need to isolate the variables, right? So what are they saying? The variable we want to isolate is the effect of price. But there's so many different things between Yellowknife and Toronto, right? These markets might be different for a lot of reasons. So if people buy less coffee in Yellowknife, It might not be because of the price. It might be because maybe incomes are lower. Maybe they just like coffee less there, right? There could be a whole host of reasons. Right? So we can't just compare two markets where our variable is different and say, okay, that's the effect of price, or that's the effect of, the change, because other things are changing too. Right? One option, what if we, instead of raising the price on everything, we could introduce a premium blend that's more expensive, and then we could see how people react, right? Do they buy less of this more expensive coffee? So the issue here, changing two things at once, right? Again, we're not isolating the variable, right? We're not isolating the price, we're changing price, but we're also increasing quality. So if, people might actually buy more premium blend at 30 cents more, right? So by changing two things at once, we don't really answer a question. And what if we only tested the higher price on loyal customers, right? Let's say we raise the price, but only for guys who use their Tim Hortons app. Well, loyal customers might be different than regular customers, right? So really, what we need to do is do an experiment by only changing one thing across two groups of people and seeing how they react. Okay. All right, so let's kind of wrap up how you interpret and report findings. So you've kind of created your research question motivated by initial thought and classified it. You've described your research plan. So what variables do I need to gather? What variables do I need to answer my question? Then you have your data collection, and we've seen, you can do surveys, you can gather secondary data, you can try to get revealed preference or stated preferences. And if you're doing a causal question, you'll try to run an experiment. Okay. And now you kind of have all this data, you need to interpret and report your findings. So let's take a look at a company, it's Pandora, it's an internet radio company. And their initial thought was, we're losing money. Okay. Common thought for a lot of apps, a lot of companies that are out of the kind of initial growth phase, like they've burned through all their whatever series A, B, C, D funding. They've grown, they have a lot of users, but they're not making money, right? So their thought is, we're losing money, costs are bigger than our revenues. And just so we're all on the same page, what is internet radio? It's kind of like you just go to a website or you have this app and you tune in to a radio station, but you're listening kind of on your computer, right? So research question is, how many ads should we play, right? We need to play more ads. That's how we make money. How many should we play? So this was a question that was answered by some researchers. What they looked at, David Riley and Ryabov. Riley was the chief economist at Pandora around 2017. So what do they look at? They look at changing the amount of ads that different groups of users receive, right? If you're using an app, I guarantee you that the companies who run that app are kind of experimenting on you a bit. This app was no different. They experimented by exposing users to different levels of ad load. And in the bottom right, we see 6 by 2. What is that? 6 ads per hour times 2 ads, or 6 interruptions per hour times 2 ads per interruption. So let's say the ads are 30 seconds, right? So then that'll be about 6 minutes of ads every hour. This is the most extreme ad profile. All the way at the left, we see 3 by 1. So 3 interruptions, each interruption is just 1 ad. Okay. And on the y-axis here, we have the mean total hours. So that's how many hours are spent listening on Pandora, let's say in a month, by their users. Right? So where do they make profit? They make profit by selling the ads. So yeah, a company will pay Pandora to put an ad on this internet radio under the assumption that, oh, so where do they make profit? So there's no profit on the graph here. What we have is quantity. How much time do people spend on the app times the price that people face, right? The price of being on this app is I have to listen to ads, which is annoying. The more ads I have to listen to, you can see this downward sloping line, the less time I spend on the app. So with this, what do we have? We have a demand curve, right? How do you find the ideal number of ads? Well, what is your revenue, right? It's the number of ads you run, right? Times, or sorry, it's the price you get on your ads. So let's say that's fixed, right? Like maybe you make 3 cents charging an advertiser to play an ad to one of your users. So you're kind of making 3 cents per ad. And then you multiply that by how many ads do people actually listen to, right? And you can see the more ads I play, I'm losing customers, right? So I'm getting more from each customer because they're listening to more ads. So, for this customer in the bottom right, 12 ads per hour. So I'm making 12 times 3 cents, so 36 cents. But I'm making it off of kind of fewer customers because there's less listening happening. Whereas in the upper left, I'm only playing 3 ads. So at 3 cents, that's only 9 cents per hour for a user in this group, but I'm getting more users. So you have to balance off. If I raise the price, I lose users, but I make more on each user versus if I kind of lower the price, if I reduce the number of ads, then I'm making less per user, but I have more users. So you'll see that that'll actually create kind of an inverse U shape, right? A quadratic where you can maximize that for profit. Okay. So it's 6:02. Let's break for 5 minutes because we're going to have a little mini case where you guys will have a chance to chat to each other and introduce yourselves. So we're going to break for 5 minutes and you're going to have a 10-minute thing after that. So 6:07, we'll meet back here and I'll stay in chat to answer questions. Hey, welcome back. Before I keep going, is anyone getting some bad feedback from my mic right now? No. Okay, good. All right, cool. All right, so yeah, one of the fans in my laptop just broke. So okay. Oh. All right, cool. So let's continue on. So, all right. So right now, for the next 10 minutes or so, what I'm going to do is I'm going to break you guys out into groups. These are the groups that I have posted on Quarkus. So some of you have been messaging me about like maybe changing groups. So for now, I can't do that. So you guys will kind of be in the groups that are on Quarkus. But in your group, what I want you to do is A, if you haven't met each other, meet, have a chat, and B, look at this mini case where, again, we're returning to the Apple Watch. And the idea is, you're consulting for Apple's wearables division. And Apple believes that the ongoing change in exercise patterns during COVID-19 kind of presents an opportunity, right? So people are doing it themselves more in terms of their exercise, in terms of their wellness, things like that. So what I want your group to do is just state a research question related to this opportunity, categorize it, and then we can talk about it a little bit. So it's 6:10 right now, so I'm going to break you guys out into your breakout rooms. So sorry, 6:11 right now. So let's meet back at 6:17. So that'll give you 6 minutes to just discuss and meet each other. Okay, and I'll stay in chat if you guys have questions about the prompt or about anything. Okay, so let's see if this. Okay. So you should all have been invited to join breakout rooms if you're using your email, your kind of University of Toronto email in Zoom. So if you weren't prompted to join a breakout room, then you should kind of join the one that is on, that you're kind of associated with on Quarkus. It looks like most of you have made it.
Sorry, Prof. I don't see any option to join a breakout room. I'm supposed to be in breakout room number 3, I believe.
Breakout room number 3. Okay. So I've actually never been sitting where you are in terms of having to join a room. So maybe
I could actually just log in again with the U of T email. That would probably make it easier.
Yeah, that might help.
Okay, so I'll leave and come back. Thank you.
Okay. All right, Chelsea, you say you're in number 5. Are you in the wrong room? Did I put you in?
I'm not sure. How do I join that?
How do you join?
There's nothing like pop up on my screen or anything.
Yeah, okay, so let me try to find you. So yeah, okay, so you're in room 5. Okay, I think I put you in there. Perfect.
Hi, Prof. Could you please put me in group 9?
9. Okay,
Thank you.
sure. All right, welcome back. So hopefully that was a good chance for you guys to have a chat. For those of you who are meeting your group members for the first time. And now maybe a group can volunteer with regards to this case. Yeah, Mohammed.
So to volunteer. So 40, like this graph shows that 44% during the pandemic have stopped working out. And that's mainly because that gyms have closed down and 25% people have been working out more. That's because they've been intentionally gone out of their way to, because I think they've been adamant in working out, and they found ways to to work out at home. And I've talked to a lot of people, and they've said that since they've started working out at home, it's been a much overall better experience. And I was just talking to my group members that if we watched the latest Apple event, and they exactly targeted that market, people who started working out at home, and they've been encouraging that. And they've also, and the app, I think I forgot what's their fitness program that's paid, but they've been it's full of home workouts, guided workouts, which are very helpful. Like personally, since I got Fitbit, it changed my life basically, to sum it up. Like it changed my entire physique and whatnot. And they've been also targeting the spiritual I don't want to spiritual market, like the breathing and whatnot. The Wim
like
Hof
the kind of the
technique.
wellness market.
Yes, the wellness market.
Wellness,
And
yeah. Okay.
so that, and yeah, so
All right.
people
So yeah,
who've been
let's sorry. I'll bring it to maybe we can bring it to a question.
Sure.
If yeah, so do you feel like all of these trends and all of these capabilities of the Apple Watch motivates a specific question at this point, given kind of what we know about all these changes? Let's see. Looks like one of your oh no, sorry, Shakir's not in your group. But yeah, Mohammed, so did you have kind of a research question that you sort of focused these kind of facts and thoughts into?
Not really.
Okay, that's fair. it was a good chat,
I got
though.
carried away. Yeah.
No worries. All right. Yeah, so then Shakir, your question, let's see, your group 13. Similar conversation. Yeah, the suspense. Okay, how more willing were consumers to buy an Apple Watch if it was advertised with home exercises? Okay, so this, and you'd classify this as what kind of question? Stuck between causal and exploratory. Yeah, so I think your question is one that will inform, is a great question because it will inform your advertising campaign, right? So exactly your marketing tactics. If we change our promotions to motivate home exercise, will that increase purchase, right? That framing to me sounds causal. So yeah, good question. Has like very direct impacts. Let's see, Firas.
So we have a question here. Did wearable products see a rise in interest from demographics that originally were not interested in wearables pre-pandemic? So this directly targets those who were affected by the pandemic as a culture for wearing wearables for that purpose, because I'm assuming here that pre-pandemic, if people were still interested in buying this, then they're clearly not affected either or. Like that's not the pandemic isn't a variable that changed their mind. So I wanted to find out whether the pandemic had an effect on the interest of wearables. So that's what I wanted to find out. As for the categorization of this, I would have to say, if anybody from my team wants to help out with this, because I was stuck between either exploratory or causal, just like the last one, mostly because of the fact if it was causal, then it makes sense. It's like, did the pandemic cause an increase in interest, right? So,
amongst that subgroup who are
that substrata of people before. That weren't interested.
Okay. Yeah, so did the pandemic cause an increase in interest? So I think that that's definitely a causal framing. And I think it's a good question. And I think it motivates follow-on questions, right? So if it did increase interest, why? Like what value, what extra value do they see in the wearable post-pandemic? Is it being able to do home workouts? Is it be able to, because they have like, less time commuting, so maybe they're like taking more walks or doing something like that? I think it definitely motivates a lot of follow-on.
Yeah. Are we going to get back to our groups? I'm just asking.
Not this class.
Not this class. Okay. Okay. Fair enough. Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. But yeah, people, you can put in chat, if you found that this was like very valuable to be able to have a bit of FaceTime or voice time with your group, let me know. I can kind of bundle you guys out again for a few minutes next class. Okay, perfect. Yeah. And if anyone, at this point also, you guys should private message each other. Make sure you have all each other's emails so that you can stay in touch or whatever you use to communicate. Okay, so I see Kartik, your hand's up, but I think we're going to move on in the interest of time. So let's keep going. All right. So good research is, having a good question, collecting the data in a good way that allows you to answer that question. Good research does not guarantee a good outcome, right? So let's return to our Lego marketing manager. They did the research. They found indeed this kind of sense that there's not very many girls playing with Lego is true, right? So what should Lego do next, right? They have the data. How should they respond? Okay. So, one thing could be think, okay, like why aren't they playing with Lego? What kind of products would they like? Maybe more follow-on questions. So they decided to develop a product targeted at young girls, which turned out to be quite a flop. You can see this is like a very, very sort of stereotypically gendered product. Doesn't look at all like Lego standard stuff. This is called Lego Friends. And there was a huge backlash, right? So, what they saw in their lab was that girls tend to play with Lego more socially than boys. And so they decided to develop this product, right? So the idea of, playing with Lego socially is not a bad one, but the way that they went about this is obviously, quite poor. And, this line, I think, has either since been discontinued or just substantially pared back, and it was never a large success. Okay, so that kind of wraps up research. Now, consumer behavior. Okay, so here for the rest of this lecture, we'll talk about sort of a rational model of consumer behavior. We're thinking about the buying behavior of final consumers who buy goods and services for personal consumption. We'll talk a little bit about business, just very briefly. This is consumers. Why do we study it? Indeed, we study very little else as marketers. At the end of the day, you always want to know how consumers are going to respond to something you plan to introduce, unless you're marketing to businesses, in which case business behavior is what you care about. But really, one aspect is learning how to persuade consumers to buy their products instead of competitors' products. But that's, fairly narrow. That's kind of like advertising focused definition of what marketers do. Learning how to improve the product offerings in the first place, right? Not just persuasion, but improvement. Decide on the price, decide on what channels to make the product available through, right? So all of our studies of consumer behavior is to allow us to pick our marketing tactics a bit more effectively. And of course, the purpose of that is to create value for customers and then also to capture value in return, right? Using all 4 Ps, right? Price, product, place, and promotion, okay? So traditionally, when we study kind of consumer behavior, it's presented as this direct linkage from, say, a stimulus to a response, right? So consumer behavior is kind of considered a field of inquiry in its own right? Marketers kind of study consumer behavior to understand basically how these stimuli lead to a response, right? So it's not enough to know if I change the price, how much will buyers consume, how much less will buyers consume. Really, we want to kind of disentangle what's going on, like why is this reduction in price leading to this particular response? Why is this change in promotion tactics leading to this particular response? So today we'll maybe like look a little bit into this black box of sort of from a rational point of view. Next class, we'll think about it from the psychological point of view. So at this point, I sometimes bring in this example where I ask someone to consider the pair of socks that they're wearing. But in the interest of time, I'm just going to run through it myself. So the idea is, you want to consider the socks that you're currently wearing. So think about, just take a look down at your feet. Maybe you're not wearing socks. Maybe you are. If you are, take a look at them and ask yourself, okay, where and when did I buy them? Why this pair? And from the moment you first encountered the socks, how much time did you spend thinking about them before you bought them, right? If you encountered them on the shelf or online. What other factors do you consider when buying socks, right? Other than price and place. Did you ask anyone for advice? If so, who? And if you could do it all over again, would you go back and buy a different pair of socks? Okay. It's a very involved set of questions for a pair of socks, right? Rio says Walmart, cheap, few seconds based on price. Many of you probably are thinking the same thing, right? Thinking mostly about price for such a basic necessity. Well, what about this product, right? UTM. When you applied, where were you? Why UTM and not a different university? How long did you deliberate about it? What factors did you consider when you were applying here? And did you ask anyone for advice? If so, who? And if you could do it all over again, would you have applied to some other schools, right? So 2 sets of involved questions. One product has much more sophisticated answers, right? Every day you reconsider. Yeah, that's life. So we have multiple types of buying behavior. Okay. So the socks, we kind of feel like there's something different about buying socks as opposed to coming to UTM, right? That maybe these 2 types of buying behavior reflect fundamentally different processes. So we have another nice 2x2 matrix, right? So our types of buying behavior, we have maybe high involvement versus low involvement, right? Socks are low involvement for sure. And then we have brands where there's big differences between them, where we have to really consider and weigh the alternatives versus a few differences between brands, okay? So bottom right, habitual buying behavior, that would be socks, right? Not thinking very hard, so low involvement of your kind of cognitive processes, few differences between brands. You kind of just grab whatever you want. Versus UTM, right? Presumably very high involvement, right? Like you thought carefully before you decided on UTM versus different school. And there are significant differences between UTM and other schools, right? Even UTM versus say UTSC, right? Same UT brand. One of them is a very different location, right? That's a significant difference. That's a very different attribute, right? So we have this kind of complex buying behavior where we're kind of thinking through all these questions versus habitual buying behavior, right? Sphera says price elasticity of demand for low priced items are usually inconsequential to the decision as well. That's an interesting thought, and definitely come back to that when we talk about pricing. So Firas is saying, when you're thinking about a low priced item, so if I understand correctly, you're saying price elasticity of demand doesn't matter. So if the price goes up a little bit or down a little bit, price elasticity of demand being inconsequential would mean you don't react. You just grab the thing, right? That could be true, right? Certainly it's true for brands that we rely on, like say toothpaste or personal care products, right? You just kind of buy the one that you know works, right? So let's come to kind of our main concept for customers' rational decision-making process, the idea of customer value, right? The simple idea is that customers buy from the firm that will offer them the highest customer perceived value. What is customers' perceived value? It's the evaluation of the difference between all the benefits and all the costs of the market offering, okay? Value of the product can be very different to different customers, right? People can care about different product features. And that's why we call it customer perceived value. There's no absolute value of UTM. There's no absolute value of the socks. There's only what different people value it at, right? And that will be dependent on, their personal preferences, their culture, their context, right? Apart from different people valuing it in different ways, right? Products can be valuable themselves in fundamentally different ways, right? So a product like water in the desert, extremely valuable. Product like a diamond in the desert, not very valuable if you're kind of perishing of thirst. But they can be valuable in kind of these different ways. And perceived value varies, okay? Another reason we use the word perceived value is not just because it's like the customer specific value, but because what the value a customer perceives might not even be what they truly value it at, right? Perceived value can be manipulated through kind of psychological or cognitive biases, which we'll talk about next lecture. Okay. Lots of things affect how you perceive the value of something, right? Cultural things, social things, personal, so like demographics, and psychological, right? Now, the key customer relation management measures when we're thinking about customer perceived value, right? We have this subjective evaluation of the difference between the benefits and costs of a particular offering. And we also have this idea of customer satisfaction, okay? So customer satisfaction, this is the difference between the perceived performance of a product and the customer perceived value at the time of purchase, right? So time of purchase, you perceive the value to be something, whatever, you buy it, right? Your satisfaction is going to be the difference between your perceived performance once you've actually used it and the perceived value at the moment you bought it, okay? The desired outcomes of customer relationship management are twofold. Attract customers. To attract customers, what do you need to do? You need to make sure that your market offering offers the highest customer perceived value relative to your competitors. So customer attraction relies on CPV being high enough. However, you're also trying to retain customers, right? Customer retention relies on high enough satisfaction, okay? Satisfaction is like this ongoing value you get, the difference between how it's actually performing and how you expected it to perform, right? Your perceived value at time of purchase. So customer satisfaction, to kind of put it in a super simple little toy formula, is equal to that perceived performance minus customer perceived value. And what difficulties that create for the marketer? Well, as a marketer, you can try to increase perceived value, right? That's what we're trying to do. We're trying to make sure that consumers pick our product over the other products. As you increase consumer perceived value, though, you're increasing kind of the negative term in that equation, right? If you're not also increasing perceived performance, your customers won't be satisfied and retention is going to go down, right? So attraction can be kind of boosted, right? but you're going to have a cost of lower retention, right? If you set CPV very low, you kind of lowball your expectations, though you'll kind of prevent yourself from attracting customers. Whereas if you set it too high, you'll keep yourself from retaining customers, holding perceived performance fixed, right? So this is something we'll get into a lot next lecture, because all of the psychological kind of tricks that you can do in marketing increase customer perceived value without really changing perceived performance, right? So it's kind of baked in that you don't want to manipulate CPV too much. Otherwise, the retention will just not be there. Okay. So our buyer decision process, our kind of rational decision process, in marketing, we kind of lay it out as follows. We start from need recognition. Then we go to information search, evaluation of alternatives, purchase decision, and post-purchase behavior. So we're going to go through each of these steps over the next few slides. Now, I put a little asterisk on buyer decision process because it doesn't really pertain to all types of decisions, right? With socks, you can see like going through all of these steps is probably not something you're going to do every time you buy some socks. In particular, just intuitively reading these steps, information search, probably not something that you look at, right? Evaluation of alternatives, again, not something you care about. If you have your brand or all you care about is the lowest price, then that's how you decide what to buy, right? So this isn't for every process, but this kind of describes a maybe complete superset of steps that you can engage in when you're thinking about the decision process. So our first step is need recognition, right? So we know what needs are, right? It's kind of that lack of something. It occurs when the buyer recognizes a problem or a need. It's triggered by something, right? Some internal stimulus, maybe an external stimulus, right? But something has kind of triggered your perception that, oh, something is lacking here, right? So internal stimuli, you know, the book lists things like hunger and thirst, right? Very basic, you know, you need food or you need water. Right? Internal stimuli could also be a memory, right? That comes from inside your brain. Something that was kind of maybe put there, or a thought that you had earlier is kind of reminding you, oh yeah, I need this thing, right? External stimuli, you know, we often think of promotions, advertising, seeing a brand, right? You see, you know, the McDonald's logo, that will stimulate your hunger externally, right? Sometimes these two stimuli are kind of combined, right? So hunger is an internal stimulus. The ad is trying to get you to buy a Snickers, okay? Does need recognition begin with the internal or the external stimulus, right? The external here kind of conjures the internal, okay? So marketers, you know, you kind of use external stimuli to activate a need and also to prime a consumer to consider that marketer's particular brand or product, right? Next, so this ad is basically saying, next time you're hungry, maybe you'll remember this ad and that'll prompt you to think about a Snickers, right? So you start with a stimulus. After which time you search for information, right? Information search occurs when the consumer is moved to search out more information, either through an active process where you're Googling or you're looking on your phone, or you're even just looking around, looking at the world around you, or you're asking people, right? Some kind of active process, or you might simply have heightened attention, right? You might simply be perceiving more more closely sort of information that's already available to you. Okay. So again, you might skip this step. If it's a product you've bought several times before in exactly the same place, right? If it's your favorite food in your favorite spot, or if the stimulus that triggered the need recognition kind of conveyed all the information that you need for the purchase, right? Say you see a vending machine that triggers your hunger. Well, there's the price and the place, it's all right there. So sources of information, the gold standard is you want information to come from a personal source, right? Family, friends, or neighbors, your peers, okay? Everything else is demonstrably less effective at conveying information. People weight information from a commercial source much lower than from a personal source. People do tend to weight public information or certain information from a public source, like customer ratings, fairly highly, but not as highly as a personal recommendation, right? The idea of stars being maybe, not fully representative quality because companies pay people to give good reviews, right? You can never sort of fully trust that. Experiential is also kind of a gold standard, right? What's a better source of information than your own experience? But often that's not going to be available, right? We'll look next class at how you can try to get experiential information to someone who's never had a product before without actually kind of giving away the product for free. Sometimes you do need to give away, sometimes you do see products being given away for free, like free samples, right? That's experiential information. It's costly for the company, but it's worth it because experiential information is valuable. What do you search for? What kind of information are you trying to get? What's available? What characteristics those products have? How much do they cost? Where are they? Is the quality good, right? If you're looking for services, this is typically where you would start, right? You would do your information search on Google, or you would ask a neighbor or a friend or a family member, hey, can you recommend a good repair person for plumbing, right? So here, when you just glance at it, yeah, this looks almost like public, but Puya points out, these are sponsored search results. What does that mean? It means that each of these providers has paid Google to put their results up here at the top of the rankings before the sort of organic results appear below them, right? Yeah. So this is kind of a commercial source of information, but it's disguised as a public source, right? Why are they trying to disguise it with these kind of, having it appear as a Google result and having these kind of star ratings appear front and center? Because people trust public sources a lot more than commercial sources. Okay, so searching for information, you're looking for characteristics, you're relying on personal recommendations and your own experiences. And maybe secondarily on advertising and public sources. And now you're going to start weighing attributes, right? You're going to start thinking, okay, which one should I pick? And this is maybe a typical situation that you would face if you were in Shoppers Drug Mart. Does anyone know what product is this? What are we looking at here? Shelves and shelves full of what? Deodorant. Yeah, perfect. So how do we tell it's deodorant? Which brand clued you in? Oh, there's the shape of the bottles. Yeah, for sure. So Secret, Old Spice, yeah, the bottle shape. So these are deodorants, and this is a bit extreme, but it's not that far off of what you would see in Shoppers Drug Mart or wherever you buy your deodorant, right? So, what are we looking at here? You are choosing between different options, but you're not choosing between all of these options, right? Overwhelming choice, right? Yeah, this is overwhelming. Lysol. Yeah, so this is overwhelming. You're focusing probably on a very specific brand, right? You're going to focus on that brand and you're going to choose amongst those options. Okay. This is very important. This is a challenge for marketers, right? The set of products you consider is so much smaller than the total set of products out there. You know, Lysol deodorant may be incredible, but we would never know, right? Because we never go to look at that part of the aisle, right? It's probably not incredible. Don't buy Lysol as deodorant. The next thing we're thinking about is, you know, even once we've picked our brand, here we see Kellogg's, 3 different options. We're not really picking amongst all of the options, right? We're not thinking about all of the characteristics, right? If you're like me, you're probably picking between, you know, cornflakes and Rice Krispies, right? You're paying attention to those two. Fiber plus antioxidants, you know, doesn't look like it's for me, but it's definitely for someone, and that someone might not be paying attention to cornflakes or Rice Krispies, right? So what have we learned from these 2 examples? When we look at evaluation of alternatives step, the consumer is using information to evaluate alternatives, but they're only evaluating alternatives in the set of products that is already kind of they're keyed up to consider. What we'll call the consideration set, right? The consideration set is different than the choice set. This is your choice set for deodorant. Your consideration set is a lot smaller. For marketers, a lot of the time, the key difficulty is getting into a consumer's consideration set, right? So you're going to be processing information, you're going to be weighing pros and cons to arrive at a choice, but you're not going to be looking at all the attributes, right? If your Kellogg's buying habits are such that you're kind of just looking at cornflakes or Rice Krispies, you know, you don't really care about the fiber or the antioxidants, right? You're not looking at that characteristic. So you're not looking at all products, you're not looking at all characteristics. What's the marketer's role? Highlight the features that are the strengths in the information stage so you can evaluate it favorably at this stage, and make sure your product is in the consumer's consideration set. So our last decision is whether to purchase, and this one feels straightforward, right? When the consumer buys the product with the highest perceived value. But after all those steps, the product might not be purchased, right? The highest perceived value might not be high enough for someone to buy. Why might that be the case? You know, maybe they think the perceived value will be higher tomorrow, right? Maybe they think the price will go down. Or maybe they're waiting for some kind of bundle deal, right? To buy kind of 2 things together. There's no guarantee that a product is purchased. And in many cases, multiple products are going to be purchased, right? So the highest customer perceived value doesn't guarantee a sale, right? That's kind of the takeaway here. The purchase decision is not kind of just checking the box. Lastly, now we have post-purchase behavior, right? So post-purchase behavior is these days rating a product, telling your friends about it, telling your family about it, right? It's behavior driven by satisfaction or dissatisfaction felt after the purchase, right? So maybe just in chat, you guys can write, you know, have you ever written a review of a product or service kind of without being paid or prompted? Yeah, okay, so lots of reviews. And was it driven by satisfaction or dissatisfaction? Both. Usually it's got to be some extreme. Shawarma poutine with no gravy or cheese. So dissatisfaction. Yeah. So, you know, why do we do it? Why do you sort of spend your time to inform others? Strangers, right? Not your kind of family whose happiness you might value directly. To spite the company, okay? To punish a company that's created a bad product. Alexandra, if there's a reward or compensation, so kind of rational reasons, right? Getting paid. And Saba says, it helped me, so I returned the favor. Okay, so it's like a relationship. Yeah. So this is something that, we'll come back to later, but this idea that customer satisfaction, the perceived performance is good relative to even what you were expecting is kind of key to creating these, what feel like relationships, right? Where it's, you kind of did something good for me. It was better than I expected, right? It feels like, I gave you this money, but you kind of gave me more than I was even hoping for. So, I'll give you something back, right? So when we think about kind of the marketing tactics that we were analyzing in our market research section, promotion is a key one. So when we think about promotion, it can kind of affect any of these stages of the purchasing process, right? Promotion, we saw it can affect your need recognition. It can affect what information you're exposed to, right? It can affect how you evaluate the alternatives. All of those things could potentially funnel into increased sales. Comparatively, price, product, and place, these are things that really come in at the evaluation of alternatives, right? If the price is low, if the product is high quality, if the place is convenient, then this will kind of lead you to choose that one. That will increase customer perceived value. But promotion, and a reason why we often think of that as the marketer's role is because it can really affect you at every stage of the buying process. So it's maybe more powerful. Now, for those of you who've taken economics and microeconomics, there we also have a way of a rational process for how consumers decide to buy, right? If you have two goods, X and Y, and they have prices, price P is some dollar amount, $3 per unit, Q is some dollar amount, $5 per unit, and you have your income, well, then, what you're trying to do is you're trying to maximize your happiness, your utility function, subject to your budget. If you've never seen this before, don't worry, we're not going to be kind of testing on this. But I wanted to connect it to economics because the economics tools are really being used heavily in marketing now, okay? This idea of maximizing our utilities subject to our budget constraint will lead us to our optimal set of choices, right? And that'll create some kind of demand curve where we can see as we increase the price, we drop the quantity. Well, where does that fit into what we've been discussing? It's basically steps 3 and 4, right? We're evaluating the different alternatives, right, that we've already kind of pre-selected to be in our consideration set, goods X and Y. And we're evaluating them based on their prices and how much utility they give us. And that'll decide how much of each we purchase, right? So, why do we think about need recognition in marketing? Well, it does seem to be important, right? For things like promotions, prompting you to have the stimulus to recognize you need something. Can we incorporate that into the economic model? Not in this course and not in probably economics courses you'll take in undergrad, but indeed, like if you go into grad school and you think about models of consumer behavior, you do use the economics tool and incorporate features that can mimic things like need recognition and information search, right? Because the economics tools are incredibly useful. The marketing insights we think are also useful. So, let's kind of combine the two. All right. So we only have a few minutes left. So for business behavior, I'm going to just put this slide up and I'll have it posted after class, of course. It's very similar to the consumer's decision process. So I have the same 5 steps laid out here as for consumers, but there's kind of slightly different things. So I'll kind of let you look at it on your own time. And if you have questions, feel free to come during office hours. Okay. And the very last thing, if it's a product that hasn't been seen much before, so if anyone recognizes this product, feel free to type that in chat. I get a million ads for this on Instagram every day. If it's a product that you don't know, what does it do? Like, what is it for? Then that's kind of a different buying process, right? It's a new product. It's not necessarily buying, it's maybe thinking about adopting. Gillian says for posture. Yeah, so this is for posture. So it vibrates if you slouch, right? And that's supposed to kind of key your brain like, oh, sit up straight, right? So for buyers adopting new products, we kind of have a slightly different process, which again, I'll kind of let you guys look at on your own. Everything that you need to know about this is on the slides. But there's, moving from awareness to adoption is the process here. Okay. And here's kind of the definition of each of those things. Okay. Next class, behavioral theories of consumer choice. So when consumers don't behave rationally in kind of this economically motivated model, they behave weirdly in a kind of a psychological way. What does that look like, and how should we understand that and utilize that as marketers? 2 surveys this week. Survey 3A, that's just going to be a simple yes or no question. I'm gathering some stated preference data from you guys on whether you would buy something at a particular price. So it's simple yes, no. 3B is going to be kind of our standard survey, and I'll ask you about your answer next week, and you'll see the prompt posted online tonight. Okay. All right, so I'll stick around for a few minutes. I think some of you had questions about groups, but otherwise, yeah, I'll see you guys next week.